Hello and welcome to Comprehension Points video Snark. This video series isn't an audiobook. If you thought that it was, please stick around and learn some reading and listening comprehension skills. I read books, discuss what went wrong and how they can possibly be fixed. I'm continuing my read through of Game of Sunken Places by M.T. Anderson. Not the first video, go check out the others. Links are posted below. Part 2, Chapter 16. The boys naturally go to the only place that they know, Calgrash's house. When the troll answers the door, he greets them with excitement and doesn't seem all that worried about why they might have raced to his house in the middle of the night in the middle of a thunderstorm. Instead, he tuts over how wet that they are. When the boys finally explain what happened, Calgrash is like, well, that doesn't sound like Max at all, which, buddy, get some priorities. I'm all for a mature, level-headed adult figure, but, I think a little bit of reaction would go a long way here. After he gets the boys dried off with some mugs of hot cider, he takes them into the library where he reads to them until they fall asleep in front of the fire. The boys wake up in the middle of the night to Calgrash seeming to have a nightmare. In his sleep, the troll reaches for an amulet. Once in his hand again, the troll quiets down and goes back to sleep. I'm not sure that this will be important later, but I'm mentioning it in case it is. In the morning, they wake up and simply have breakfast like nothing is wrong at all. I get ignoring Calgrash's nightmare or whatever was going on, but damn, there's not a single ounce of urgency in Brian and Greg. The entire thing is honestly a little maddening and baffling. And then the boys do bring up Calgrash's bizarre midnight episode, but they make it seem like he was walking around in his kitchen destroying everything in sight. However, Calgrash has no memory of this and keeps blaming it on the demons and the missing food as the end result of rodents. The entire thing is weird, and again, I'm not even sure if this tidbit is even going anywhere or not. After breakfast, the boys head off. However, it's not with any sense of actual urgency. For sure, not like they'd been chased from Max's house by whatever had been frickin' chasing them last night. I'm not even sure if the author himself knows, since the entire thing was so vague. Moving on. They get back to the boat, a task that takes more than a page to accomplish while somehow not moving the plot forward at all, and then they get into an argument over where it is that they want to go. And granted, they start talking about how some of the names are starting to recycle in the game's locations, but my problem is that they might as well be speaking in Simlish for all the sense that they're making, which is completely ridiculous considering that we're now in the second half of the story. Things should be amping up for the grand finale, not being as confusing as they were at the start of this game, not to mention the fact that it takes way too long. Behind the propeller, the water boiled. Is that really the word that you want to use here? Are you sure? And then even the narration seems to give up on itself. It seemed to take ages to cross the lake. Although Brian still gazed around him at the chilly shadows, Gregor gave up and inspected the herringbone pattern of his knickerbockers. Does the author seriously not know that he can skip all of the tedious bits? He doesn't have to insert quite literal navel gazing. I feel like he doesn't know that, and it worries me immensely. I say knowing full well that this man does not know how to properly tell a coherent story. After crossing the lake, the boys start up the stairs to finally find out where the Snark is. I'll spare you a tedious page about them walking up the stairs and simply tell you it's some kind of orc-ish thing, but blind. If the boys hadn't silently raced past where the Snark was, they likely would have been killed. However, this is such a non-event that I'm not quite sure that I give a hoot. I'm so freaking tired. Chapter 17. The boys went away from the Snark, which I'd like to remind them that it would probably be a lot easier to actually escape if they didn't insist on yelling out their moves to one another. Excuse me, there's a wall that deserves me to smack my head into it for a little bit. Eventually, the boys managed to get away. However, this is only because the author commands them to do so rather than on any genius action of their own. Then I guess they meander through some tunnels for a few hours before they somehow find a hatch on the side of the mountain. It's now dusk, which surprises me immensely. Literally an entire day was lost in the summer. How? What did they do for all that time? Simply wander around lost? For all the time for the author to skip ahead and he picks now? Anyway, since it's getting late and going to be dark soon, the boys decide to set up camp for the night. They know that there's no way that they'll be able to make it back to Calgrash's house, let alone back to Max's place right now. I'd also like to chime in with the idea that they'd probably save a lot of time if they didn't have to schlep all that way in the morning. And then, that's it. That's the entire chapter. Them running around and wasting an entire flipping day for no real reason other than, padding, I guess. Chapter 18. As the boys continue on, they think that at some point they're probably going to have to go back to the house simply to obtain another quest item. After all, they've made 2 things, so the chances of them needing more is pretty likely. The boys eventually leave the path, which they know that they're not supposed to do. However, I feel like we're at the point where, without further instruction as to why things are and a proper explanation about the rules, they kind of don't give a rat's behind anymore. They eventually find a little house with the elven fellow inside who is Sniggleping. The elf in question asks if they're playing the game and then says that since they're out of bounds, Thresher will be angry, but he invites them in anyway. He almost immediately wants to send them away again when they bring up the drawing of the Snark he has on the table, which, why did you invite them in if you weren't actually going to talk about the game? Finally, Sneakleping admits that he created the star sense. Do you know how hard it is to find an ogre these days? No, not just hard, impossible. Impossible. That is a choice. He then starts to throw a tantrum that quickly devolves into him screaming about Keebler elves. I've got nothing. Maybe the author thought that he was being funny or witty, but it's hard to take any of this seriously when you're screaming about chocolate cookies. The boys try to get him to talk about what else that he's made, but he screams at them that he will not be tricked into revealing what has yet to come. However, he does admit that he also makes Calgrash, although Calgrash is bugging while not hallucinating, which sure explains his behavior earlier. However, this line of conversation quickly devolves into screaming about townhouse crackers this time. Before anything else can happen, this mysterious speculant shows up and basically ushers the boys back to where they're supposed to be. I guess going to Sniggleping's house is equivalent of opening up a door at the haunted house and seeing the gorilla with his head off and the guy in the suit guzzling at Monster Energy. Kind of takes some of the magic away, you know. I thought that the speculant was simply going to shove the boys back into the path, but he instead takes them to, I guess, a different part of the game where they have to make their next choice to where they're going to go next. He speaks to them, or at least he attempts to. He's one of those characters where he can only speak in riddles. But yeah, I'm not even going to attempt to decode any of this. Literally nothing has been actually important up until now, so why change any of that? As if to prove my point, after a few paragraphs of nonsensical real talking, Greg eventually looks at the speculant and is like, we'll do whatever the hell you want so long as you shut up. However, this was apparently what the speculant wanted in the first place, and he eagerly presses on with the boys in tow. However, what he was really doing was taking them on a shortcut that's a lot closer to Max's house. He then pointedly tells the boys to go, which, for some unholy reason, that's said normally. So what's up with the riddle speaking earlier? Ugh. Anyway, before the boys leave, they ask about the boat, which is on the other side of the underground lake now. But the speculant clearly has other things to think about than the lake, and again tells them to go. Chapter 19. Brian is hyper-focused on one thing and one thing only, about how Calcrash is a robot, but that he doesn't know it. Hold that thought, because I'm going to come back to it in a moment. Craig exclaims that they saw some scentless perfume in the basement, so that's how they're going to sneak past the ogre. It found them because of their scent, so that's obvious. So it's the obvious solution. He's ready to burst into the house to get it, but Brian also brings up about how they were run out of there 2 days earlier, so it's not like they know what they're going to find. However, Greg is quick to brush that aside and only offhandedly mentions that Calgrash's house is on the way back to Max's place, and completely and utterly disregards literally anything that Brian has to say. This is seriously starting to take me off something fierce. Greg is a really terrible friend, not only for having dragged Brian into all of this, but also because he refuses to listen. I'm not even sure that Brian even wants to be here at this point, and the only reason why he's still around is simply because of Greg. Like, I'm sorry, but why are you both still around? For some people that you don't even know, for people who are going out of their way to kill you so that they can come out on top, why can't these people fight their own battles? Why are they dragging unrelated parties into this? Unrelated children, I might add. Why can't they tell the boys literally anything about what's going on and why it has to be this way? Like, we are in the downward side of the second half of this book. These are questions that should have come up as soon as the game was introduced. Instead, we have this story that's been fumbling. Literally nothing has been explained, let alone to the readers. And to make matters worse, Greg is so obsessed with this idea of an adventure that he's putting Brian in danger. It's maddening over how awful that everything about this book is. Anyway, they go back to Calgrash's house where Brian is quick to find a switch on the back of the troll's neck. Then, rather than to ease the poor bloke into it, Brian rudely rips the bandage off and tells him, hey, by the way, you're actually a robot made by a mad elf who lives further up in the mountain. Which, that's a choice. Calvert brings up all the things that he claimed come into his house every night and break all of his things. But the boys explained what they witnessed at the night that they stayed over, that the only thing destroying the items in the house was Calgrash having something akin to a seizure on the floor. However, as you might imagine, walking up to some guy and telling him that he's actually a robot and everything he remembers is nothing but an implanted memory doesn't exactly fly over that well. Calgrash kind of throws a bit of a fit before he sends off, clearly in a depressed funk. I am going to look Brian in the eye and ask him what it is that he thought that was going to happen by telling Calgrash about this. What did you want to accomplish here, buddy? While the boys head back to Max's house, we randomly jump over to Calgrash because this is what we wanted, him moping about not being human for more than a page. Plot? What plot? There's no plot here. I'm so frustrated with this book. Thanks for listening to my book Snark on YouTube. New videos are up every Monday, but stick around because I sometimes drop random videos on other days too. Just as a reminder, even if you can't financially support me, there are other ways to help me out. The first is watching this video as well as all my other videos. It's also important to like and subscribe. Finally, you can share this video with all your friends so that they can help as well. If you're already caught up with all of my videos, you can go to Tumblr for my main book. Snark's always free and updated every morning. The only edit to Patreon is to become a member without paying. You'll get access to the same things on Tumblr, but on Patreon. Supporters can have access to so many more book snarks starting at $1 a month. Also, new is a 1-week free Patreon trial, so be sure to check that out. Special thanks to Dawn and Phoebe for supporting me on Patreon already. If you want to hear your name in my video next week, either support me on Patreon or make a one-time donation. Do you like my snarks so much that you want me to snark your writing? I do that too, but not to worry if you feel like you couldn't take the criticism. I also offer regular book editing as well. You can contact me on any of my social media platforms if you have further questions about my editing services, including pricing options. If you want to read some of the things that I've written, you can purchase my works on Amazon. I have a slew of spicy short stories and 2 full-length novels. I also frequently run flash sales on my stories, and if you don't follow me on any social media, you might want to do so just so you can know when I might be offering things for free. Links for everything will be posted below. See you next week, guys!